Hey there internets, I'm Michael and this is Toucan Play That Game. And this video is our first video looking at Splendor. And in this video I'll be teaching you how to play the game, and then my next video you'll be able to see an example of it being played, and of course my final video you'll be able to find out my thoughts in the game with my review, and of course whether or not Toucan play that game. So what is Splendor? Well, let's look at the box. We have a weird guy closely examining a diamond. Doesn't really tell us much about what it is. Okay. Well, thematically, what it is that you are jewels collectors, which sounds really dull and boring, but it's actually a good game. So thematically you're collecting jewels, but in reality you're getting victory points. And the way to win the game is to be the first person to get to 15 victory points. If you end up with multiple people getting to 15, then you win by having the most. So it's one of those ones where you get to 15, triggers the end of the game, and then everyone gets a last turn. If they manage to beat your score, then they happen to win. So it's not just about getting to 15, it's about passing 15 and having the highest score at that point. Let's take it to the table and I'll show you how to play Splendor. Welcome to the table for how to play Splendor. So the first thing I want to talk about is how you win the game, and that is by getting victory points. Now these nobles here have victory points on them, they're each worth 3. Additionally, in the different level of cards, you'll find some of the cards have victory points in the top left, and they're each worth that many of victory points. And the game will end at the end of the round when someone gets 15 victory points. So everyone will have played the same number of turns. So therefore it's important that you remember who your first player is. So to start the game, the first thing you'll need to do is set up the board. Firstly, you'll need to have the development cards split by level, and you can tell the level because on each of the cards there is a dot. 1 dot means it's level 1, 2 level 2, 3 level 3. And of course they are colour coded as well, so we've got green, yellow and blue. Once you've separated those out, you'll then shuffle them. So just shuffle them up and then set them on the table, and then you'll want to turn over 4 cards of each of the decks. Once you've laid out the cards, you'll then want to shuffle the nobles tiles. So these are the square tiles with the brown back, and they have numbers on, prices and pictures of these nobles, and you'll want to put a number of those out equal to the number of players plus 1. So here I'm setting up for a 2-player game, so I've put out 3 nobles. If it was a 3-player game there'd be 4 nobles, a 4-player game 5 nobles. The unused tiles will just go back in the box. The final thing you'll need to do is put the gem tokens on the board, and also the gold tokens. Now the gold tokens you'll always put all of them out, however the gems will differ if you're using 2, 3 or 4 players. If you are using 4 players you'll put all of the tokens out. If you are using 3 players you'll remove 2 of each of the colours, so you'd have 5 in each of the stacks on the table. And if you're doing a 2-player game like we're setting up here, then you have stacks of 4 and you leave 3 of each colour in the box. And just to repeat, the golds, you don't change the number dependent on the number of players. And that is the game set up and ready to play. So before I go into the actual way the game plays, let me just talk a bit about the different aspects of the game. So we have here these development cards. As I've already said, in the top left here, we have any victory points they are worth. In the top right, we have the colour of gem they are worth. So when you have say this one that's green, would be the equivalent of having a green token in front of you. When you have bought this card, it counts as a green token. Additionally, you have numbers in coloured circles on the bottom left. The colours represent the colour of gem required to buy this card, and the numbers represent the number of those gems. So for instance, this card here, you would need 7 blue gems, so either 7 tokens, which obviously we only have 4 out for a 2-player game, so you'll never have 7 tokens. You will need to have blue gem cards, and 3 green gems. So that's either the tokens with the green gems on, or cards with that green gem on, such as this one is itself. So that's the layout of the cards. The different levels of cards all have the same layout. The only difference is with the higher level cards, you're more likely to get victory points, but they will be harder to buy. The next thing to talk about is the layout of the nobles. So as I've already said, the top left will give how many victory points the noble is worth. And then on the left in squared boxes, we have numbers. Now, these numbers represent the number of cards that you need to have, and the colour represents the colour of card. So, for example, this noble here would require 3 black cards, so that's the cards with the black gem on, so you would have to have 3 of these. Note that the tokens don't count for these nobles, only the cards do. Additionally, it's not an action to buy a noble. Whereas you use an action to buy a card, you don't use an action to buy a noble. When you have the prerequisite cards in front of you, the noble automatically comes to visit you, and you will then be scoring its points. Once a noble has come to you, it will not go to someone else. It will stay with you for the remainder of the game. Okay, so let's talk about how you actually play the game then. Well, first thing you're going to need to do is decide who your first player is. Now, the rules say that the youngest player goes first. However, as always, I prefer to just randomise rather than use these, because if you're playing with the same people, it will just always be the same person going first. So once you've determined the first player, they will then take their turn. Once they've done their turn, play then proceeds clockwise. And the end of the game will always finish with the person to the right of the first player. Because as I said, whenever someone gets 15 victory points in front of them, you will then finish that round, which means that everyone has had the same number of turns and the same opportunities to earn victory points. So what can someone do on their turn? Well, there are 4 options for what someone can do on their turn. The first thing they can do is these 5 coloured gems here, tokens. You can choose to take 3 of these, and they must all be of different colours. However, what colours they are is up to you. So that's the first thing you can do. Take 3 of those, put them in front of you, which you'll then be able to use to buy these cards. The next thing you can do is take 2 gems of the same colour. So if I really wanted blues, I could take 2 gems of blue. And of course, those would then sit in front of me and then allow me to buy the cards. One restriction with doing this is you can only do it if there are 4 gems in the stack to begin with. So in a 2-player game, that means your opponent must not have taken any, nor you. Only when the stacks are full, because you only have 4 of each colour. You are only allowed to have 10 tokens in front of you. If you would be taking tokens as your action and it would make you go above 10, then you cannot take them. However, you can choose to take only part of the tokens that you would be taking. So if you were going to be drawing 3 tokens, for example, but you started the turn with 8 in front of you, you could still draw 2 of 2 different colours to have in front of you to take you up to 10. The next thing you can do is reserve one of the cards. So by reserving a card, you can pick one of the ones that's face up on the table. So for instance, I could reserve this card here we were looking at before. And what I would do is I would just take that card and I would sit it in front of me in my play area, face down, so that I'm not gaining the benefit from it. Additionally, I would also get to take one of these gold tokens, and the gold chips count as wilds. So when it comes to buying cards, you can use gold as if it was any colour. Whenever a card is bought or reserved, so that there's a gap left in the board, you would immediately turn over cards from the appropriate pile to refill that gap. However, just for the sake of this example, I'm not going to do so. Your final option on a turn would be to purchase a card. So this can either be a card that you have face down in front of you that you've previously reserved, and obviously that means no one else can buy that card and they can't see what it is. When you buy it, you would pay the cost of gems into the bank from in front of you, keeping in mind that cards would stay down in front of you and will always count as a permanent of that colour. And you would turn it over if it was a reserve card. If, for instance, I wanted to buy this white card here, and this has a cost of 2 blue, 2 green and 1 black, I would need to have 2 green, 2 blue and a black in my play area. And I would then just simply put these back into the pot and I would take that card and sit it in front of me. So this card is white and would mean that I would always have at least 1 white gem in front of me, counting towards buying other cards. Once you've picked which of those actions to do and then done that action, that is then the end of your turn and play would proceed round the table. As I've said, the game will end when someone has 15 points in front of them on the table, and that is the values on their cards plus any values on their nobles. So if I was the first player in the game and I got 15 points in front of me on the table, that would then trigger the end game and every other player would have one final turn in order to try and beat the number of victory points that I had in front of me. So as well as wanting to have 15 victory points to trigger the end game, I also want to ensure that I will have at the end of that round more victory points than the other players. And that is how you play Splendor. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please do check out the rest of my videos and of course subscribe to the channel. And you can also find us on social media, on Facebook and also on Twitter. And as always, thanks for watching and bye for now.